Who would have thought that a 1997 British romantic comedy crime caper would come from the minds of a couple of stand-up comedians? Well, that's exactly what happened with Shooting Fish. Richard Holmes and Stephen Schwartz were a comedy double act at university called the Gruber Brothers. They were doing film-related sketches such as James Bond in 5 minutes or Star Wars in 3 minutes, at the same time as being paid decent money to take the sketch show around the country. Holmes and Schwartz were trying to break into the film industry. Holmes had managed to get into the producing side of it by getting on board a small feature film called Soft Top, Hard Shoulder, which was written by and starred Peter Capaldi. Schwartz got the gig of directing it. The film was a surprise hit upon release in 1992, but Holmes and Schwartz wanted to write something together.
You're here to see technology at its most advanced. You're here to buy a computer you can talk to.
Dylan is the talker.
This is the first computer to be truly free of a keyboard. Remarkable.
Jez is the techie.
And there's a series of NAND gates controlled by pin 6.
If you can give me a 10% deposit now, I think I can hold them for you. Skippings? Check well.
And Georgie is the temp.
You're a con man, aren't you?
We are good guys. You have to trust me, okay?
Never trust a man with woman's hips.
What?
Rewind to the mid-80s and Holmes and Schwartz were involved in an obligation rewrite for a film that they both hated. So as they were rewriting this other film on a new Amstrad PC that wouldn't let them skip to the last page, instead they had to scroll through the entire document to get to the last page, and those scrollings took minutes. So as they were waiting for the scrolling to finish, they sat there riffing on ideas for feature film stories. The basis for Shooting Fish was an amalgamation of one idea from each of the guys. From Holmes, it came from a story about an enforcer/driver for the craze who used to do little scams. Schwartz bought stories from a family member who was a Jungian analyst that had been told many stories by his clients. From these and more stories Holmes and Schwartz told each other, they started to get the basis for the story of two guys who would pull off scams to earn a modest living. Through the years, the two writers continued to plug away at the script of these two low-end scammers. But it wasn't until they introduced a female character into the story that they really hit the jackpot.
It's tactical racing, darling. Every time he loses, his odds improve. If he wins the Challenge Cup, his sperm will be worth 200,000 a throw.
A spurt?
Yeah, exactly. It'll all be yours when we're married.
Oh, how romantic.
Originally called Entrepreneurs, it was turned down by nearly all the UK feature film making studios. Entertainment film distributors eventually turned and offered half the budget, but in return for worldwide releasing rights. Holmes jumped at the chance, but it meant he had to find the rest of the budget. Luckily, the National Lottery at that time was being run by the Arts Council, and only a week after submitting a request, Holmes received a letter to say he'd been successful. The next challenge was casting. The financiers were demanding Christian Slater for the role of Dylan, but the budget just wouldn't stretch to getting the new hot property from Hollywood. Holmes and Schwartz flew out to Hollywood to see many different up-and-coming and hot young American actors. They had seen Dan Futterman in the birdcage opposite Robin Williams, so when he arrived, they were both excited. However, there proved to be a bit of a problem because Futterman brought along with him his best friend, Philip Seymour Hoffman. And when Hoffman read for the role of Dylan, he just blew everybody away, including his best friend. But the problem was that Hoffman didn't have the to die for looks that was needed for the character, whereas Futterman did. Sorry, Seymour. Kate Beckinsale had only been in a couple of films by the time of her casting as Georgie. She came in and read and pitched how she would visualise the character. Schwartz and Holmes loved her enthusiasm straight away. Stuart Townsend came in via his agent, who happened to be Schwartz and Holmes' agent and was being bigged up as the next big British actor. And when Townsend turned up, he was dressed and acted exactly how Holmes and Schwartz saw Jez being. It was almost like life imitating art with that piece of casting. Futterman and Townsend did a little bit of additional research for their roles as they took to the streets, with Futterman selling knockoff perfume out of a suitcase. Townsend would come along and buy a bottle while members of the general public looked on. But just as money changed hands, Futterman would slam the suitcase shut and run off with the money, leaving members of the general public shocked by this blatant scam in broad daylight.
Mr. Gilzan. clear your head of all the detritus, all the flotsam and jetsam of the day, if you will, and allow me to introduce you to the future of mobile lighting.
Filming over 8 weeks on a budget of £2 million, when I spoke to producer Richard Holmes, he told me very truthfully, the script was overlong. It was a messy script. We left over 2 weeks worth of footage on the cutting room floor, and when we tested it and tested it and tested it with audiences, much to our surprise, they fucking loved it. Audiences were reacting positively to Shooting Fish, as it had now become known. It took over £800,000 in the first weekend and went on to make over £2 million. Dylan and Jez's scams are quite entertaining, reselling loft insulation door to door but throwing it over the walls of the lofts is a very clever move. Tricking businesses into thinking a small hand grip thing could conduct electricity is hilarious. They may be low rent scammers, but they've got sharp ideas.
Just grasp it in either hand, give it a squeeze, let a little light into your life.
Futterman, looking like Bradley Cooper's long-lost brother, gives Dylan all the bravado and balls that you would expect to see from Jordan Belfort. He's the character you love to hate, and also secretly respect because of his ingenious scams. Townsend Jez is the introverted, geeky guy who struggles to converse out in the open. But there is something about being with Georgie that helps him overcome that fear. And speaking of Georgie, Beckinsale's girl-next-door look combined with her character's intellect and street smarts makes her the standout. The men are charging around, playing those gullible enough to fall for those schemes, but what they don't see is that they're being played right in front of their very eyes by the one person who they think won't play them, a woman. Beyond all the comedy and romance and crime in Shooting Fish, one thing really sticks out as impressive and pleasing, and that's the subplot about helping people with Down syndrome. It could so easily have been a throwaway plot, yet here it's slowly integrated into the storyline, leading to a hugely entertaining and heartwarming finale. Some films would have made a big song and dance number about how inclusive they're being. Not Shooting Fish. It just gets on with the story and lets it speak for itself. And for that, huge praise has to go to everybody involved. This sleek, little modern-day Robin Hood crime film has plenty of Brit wit running throughout.
From Fox Searchlight Pictures
What's he doing here? Was it Scouts tonight?
comes a comedy about two con men
Brilliant.
who were hard to beat, but an easy target for love. Shooting Fish.
This is quite normal for secretarial work.
It's funny, but normal wasn't a word that sprang to mind during the course of my employment with you. Do you know the way to San Jose?
I'm going back to find some peace of mind.